so many things to do before you go live.
Okay, you're on Facebook.
Awesome. So good evening to all our viewers. Good evening, everyone. We are back with a ray of hope, where hope is not lost, but built. My show is all about bringing in people from the real world, people just like you and I, who have stories, who have their journey, who have been through a lot, who have done a lot, and yet have hope to spread around to everyone. You know, life may not always be colorful and may not always be beautiful. But when you add colors to life, it becomes beautiful. And that's my endeavor always, to ensure that that hope that is within us be not lost. There's a light that is in us, and that light needs to shine always. This evening, I have with me Yvonne Dalorto, who is a British teacher. She's a former head teacher specializing in language acquisition, synthetic phonics, and literacy skills for early years and primary age children. Since 2004, Yvonne has been living in Spain and working in bilingual teaching environment and a global teacher trainer for many years of education and coaching. She's also an author of infant and primary educational books, MELP, that's Macmillan Early Learning Path, nominated for the British Council ELTons awards, and has contributed extensively to early years and primary editorials and school curriculums. Yvonne continues to work closely with teachers and international schools with a focus on ESL, using synthetic phonics with children and SEN and social and emotional learning, SEL. It is my pleasure, my honor, a privilege to have you on my show as our guest for this evening. We're looking forward to you having a good chit chat with you, talking to you about so much that so many of our viewers could be blessed with, and so many of our viewers could be motivated, inspired, and I don't know what else should I say. I give it all over to you. I'm obliged to host the show with you for you.
Wow, that was some huge build-up. I don't know how I'm going to continue from that now. Well, it is wonderful to be on the show, Michelle, and I have seen what you've done with other people. And it is true, forget all that you hear about the introduction. That's just, you know, the outside. And what Michelle is trying to do is touch the inside, find out what's happening to people. So what I've done and what I have does not reflect what goes on inside and what I do with it. So that's why these interviews are really quite important in that respect. So thank you, Michelle. I can't hear you.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Quite of our audiences, our viewers, viewers on Facebook, our participants that have joined us would like to hear from you about something that you would want to share with us this evening before we could get on to anything with talking or interviewing you or speaking about your work. If there's anything you want to share with us before we go ahead with my questions and all of that.
Well, you did indicate to me that you wanted me to share something that pivotal in my life that changed things. And this is a common thread with the shows that you do. And yes, you know, there is something that had a huge impact on my life, which I'm quite happy to share with people now, but it's taken quite a point to get to this point. And it starts with a date. And rather than say I'm talking about loss, I'm talking about time. So on the 17th of July, 2017, my husband was diagnosed with cancer. And this type of cancer, called mesothelioma, was one that had come from him being a young man working in an environment with airborne asbestos. So little did he know that 30 years on, he was going to have full-blown cancer, lung cancer. Now, the point of this is that there was no return from this. He had about 6 months to live and he didn't know this. But suddenly time becomes a factor. We kind of live always thinking about time. We live in the past, we're talking about the future, and we're always thinking about, what we want to do. And then suddenly, with a situation like this, time starts to control us. We start thinking about how long we've got left and what we're going to do in that time. And if you become progressively ill, there's less and less time to do anything. So, of course, it was a wake-up call to realize that the biggest regret people have is for the things they didn't do. And so when my husband did go, it was a pivotal moment in my life to suddenly think, well, we're always thinking about what we want to do. And sometimes this is a fantasy idea. We could have our bucket list, but we often forget there's things we can do. And we can also look back, like the moment my husband did, where you think about, well, instead of, not in a COVID world, but instead of sitting on the sofa and watching a film, we could have gone out for a walk. I could have held the hand of a loved one. We could have spent half an hour in the sunshine having a coffee together. And we keep putting these things to the future, saying, I'll do that in the future. I'll do that next week. So I decided at the end of 2018 that I had to get time working for me, and that I was doing things that were, how would you say, enjoyable. Also, there was some compassion, but also I felt I had meaning to what I was doing. And that was the most important thing, not time for time's sake. So in 2019 was a year where I can't tell you, I had 60 flights. I don't know how many countries I went to. And the whole purpose of this was working with teachers. But of course, just like you and other people, I have to earn a living. But part of a conscious thing of this was working with teachers and children in economically deprived areas, working with rural communities. And again, it's talking about time. I'm looking at time with these young children who over time, with the right education and with the right skills, we can break the cycle of poverty. Go into countries where children end up, through lack of language skills, that little bit of English, that little bit of being able to read and write, could make the difference between them being employed locally or other people coming from other areas or other countries to fill that job. That was the big vision of time. So I was looking at what could I do now to change some of this and break the cycle. Because what we've got to think about is what we do now can impact on what we can do later on. So with the COVID, I continued with this in a more remote way, clearly. And also it's continued that these little projects have enveloped, they've got bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, would this have been my trajectory if I hadn't have had that moment where everything changed for me? I would still be looking at what I could do and not doing it in the same way. What did change was looking at opportunities time has presented to me and being able to fulfill them and build on them. So what I would like you to think about is you have your checklist of things that you want to do in the near future and the far future. We never know what's going to happen in the far future. I had plans with my husband of what we were going to do, and we never got to do them. And we put off even the small things sometimes because it was like, it's just too much to do right now. So what I would say to you is, with your life as it is, we have this super unbalance at the moment with COVID has brought a lot to us. But also, just like I did, think about what opportunities time presents to you now to do the things you could enjoy. not only reflecting with your family, with your friends, you call that friend you've been saying, I don't really want to call them because they're a right pain, but they might need your call. Your personal development. If you have the opportunity to change something in your life, now is the time, because before you know it, we run out of time. So I put my little plan into place and building on it and building on it. You have to do the same, because it's a true idiom. Time does not stand still for anyone. So it's been a journey, Michelle. And, as you see, it's impacted out. And the work with the community, the rural schools and the teachers has been the most satisfying I can tell you about. It's been a wonderful journey that I keep going back to.
That's amazing. What I could get off whatever you shared was build you today for a better tomorrow.
Of course.
Yeah. And what you said was something that each of us need to actually stop for a moment and think about. Quite a lot of times it happens. I don't know if it is only women or if it is for the common gender. So often we think we'll do it later, even if it is having a meal with our family. Okay, I've got this done. I will have a meal with you tomorrow. And that tomorrow doesn't come. That tomorrow doesn't come. So that was amazing listening to you. You spoke about time. You spoke about time, and I think that is something you kept emphasizing on. That brings me to ask you. Uh, it is, of course, with time that you're phenomenal in the education fraternity. You've done quite a lot with the knowledge that you possess, the years of experience you have makes you an expert. I would like to ask you, what was your driving force? How did you realize that your calling was teaching?
I didn't. My first degree, I was a graphic designer. And I was working about a year after being a graphic designer, and I realized my nephew had been born, and I was so acutely interested in child development. So I went back and retrained. But what I did understand, and it still is a passion with me today, is how humans learn. We take so much for granted. And what I do realize is that there is so much diversity to the way we learn, especially if you look at the umbrella of special educational needs. We are all learning in slightly different ways, and education only fits one method of learning, unfortunately. So especially with language acquisition, it's very important to know how the brain copes with 2, 3, 4 languages. But apart from that, it is a passion. I try and learn something new each day, because without that drive, how can I pass on the knowledge that I have gathered over years and give it to a young teacher and let them know this is where you're starting, but this is where you'll get to. And these challenges, we're actually working in, it's the most precious commodity ever, children's lives. And if we get it wrong for them, their futures. So we have to look at all the changes developmentally, the changes educationally, the way children are learning, which again is a huge learning curve for every teacher, but equally how we teach. We have to evolve just like children are evolving with their learning. So that is the passion behind it. And I think people who know me will know that this is exactly spot on. I have a quest for knowledge. So it's important to share. I don't think it's right, if you have a knowledge, you can't be selfish with it. We are here to pass it on. I can't take it with me. I want to share it.
So well put up. And yes, I read somewhere and it said that you can't be a disciple if learning stops. To be a disciple, you have to learn. And as teachers, if we stop learning, I don't think we would be able to push our students, our children, our learners to actually learn.
Yeah.
So that was wonderfully said, Yvonne. Thank you so much, actually, for actually telling us that what you did was learned and you still learn even today. Something
Yeah.
that we all teachers need to have more than teaching. Our passion should be to learn.
Yeah.
Teaching comes only when you learn.
Yeah.
So allow me to say this: you are, um, I would coin it as an edu celeb, and it is an honor to have you with me. And I'm
Wow, that's
only
I
privileged.
like that.
Yes, it's the new normal, the edu celeb. You know, we are all celebrities now because we are on air every single day, and we don't have retakes.
No.
You are on air. You go live with your students. You're
Mhm.
the actor. The stage is all yours. And you cannot do a retake. So you are a celebrity. You're an educational celebrity. So I
Well,
like to coin it as edu celeb.
good word. Yeah. But what I would say is that I have met outstanding teachers in rural schools, in schools, and I wish I could give them the platform. I wish I could get them out there to be able to talk about what they do on a daily basis with the challenges. And also some children who have made it, you know, that is the success story. The children who have come from a point where you think they're just not going to get through this educational system, and they've gone on to be fantastic human beings, carve out a career for themselves, and keep developing themselves professionally. It's not all about developing professionally. Let's not forget that. We shouldn't always put on a child, you have to, you have to. We want to develop the whole human being, the
Absolutely.
compassion, the social and emotional learning, being able to work in a group, you know, be a good person. You can have academic success, but you also need to be a good person as well. Getting the two together, that is hugely important.
How well put up. And yes, that's most important.
Mm.
I always tell my children, you could be a doctor, you could be a scientist, you could be an engineer. However, if you're not a good human being, nobody would ever want to work with you.
No,
Nobody
no,
would want to be ever treated by you if you're not a good human being, but a very good doctor. You would have to
no.
be doing nothing. And,
Yeah.
and you don't go around with those tags, a tag of a doctor or a tag of a scientist or a tag of an engineer. What you go with is your personality and the way
Oh,
you are that reveals
yeah.
yourself.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I think more than anything, what we are looking at now, you know, during this pandemic, is how we're recognizing the importance of children's mental health and also the mindfulness and social emotional learning, how this has to be put in place because these children are going to find it tough going back into the classrooms and re-establishing friendship groups and everything. It's tough. It's quite hard to be a child today. It never was easy, but it's quite hard today. Yeah.
True. I absolutely agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. It's tough to be a kid today.
Mm.
Um, My question to you is, Yvonne, since you have done so much, you learn, you ensure that learning remains your passion. You said that your knowledge should be passed on. What good is that knowledge if you've not imparted it? There has to be an impartation. And to reach up to the level that you are in, I wouldn't say level, but what you are today,
Mm.
I'm sure there has been a flip side to it too. You could have had your struggles, maybe in your initial years as a teacher. Every teacher has a story. We would like to hear yours. Was there a struggle when you took this teaching job as your career? When you became a professional teacher, you've
Mm.
been a trainer. You've set curriculum. Uh, was there struggle? Because I believe everything that we do has some struggle, and struggles are only I would say situations in your life where you learn the better side of you and you become a better you. So we would like to hear if there was anything that you would like to share with us. Could you please talk to us about that?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is that it's always a struggle working full time with a family. That's one thing. And both my children, whom I'm immensely proud of, because, you know, it's hard having a mum as a teacher. And it's also hard when sometimes your mum is your teacher, which happened to one of my children. That was a struggle. But thinking about that is also one of the biggest challenges was moving from the UK to work in a Spanish international school, because it was a completely different approach to education. So I was used to a completely different, the British system, where we had a national curriculum and everything was working towards that. And there were line managers, and the way we designed the curriculum was completely different. And I came to Spain, and it was not only challenging with the second language, but also the cultural difference. You know, we're talking about a European country, but it was much more tactile. The children were very loud. The curriculum was tough. It's a very, very tough curriculum here in Spain. And also trying to get the balance right, which was my thing about working in early years, was trying to get the children away from being at the desks and more interactive play where they were learning. And this did take a particular toll physically and mentally, trying to change the way that early years was being conducted in the 2004 and evolving it to a more British standard. And that took about 3 years and an awful lot of work. But I was lucky in respect that I had great support from my husband at that time, and also my kids were in the same school, so that made a big difference. I wasn't teaching them, but it made a big difference. At the end of the day, when we all went home together, they could recognize, even though they were young, how tough it was. They could pop down to the infants and they could see, you know, one teacher with 35 children was quite horrific, you know, the dynamics. So that was tough, but with every experience, you learn something. And I learned how to adapt, how to plan better, how to get things in order, how to get these children sorted out. And it must have had an impact, because when these children graduated at 18 years old, the year before last, they still remembered me, and I was delighted.
So the nuggets that I got from whatever you shared was plan better, get things in order. I think all teachers, female teachers, need this: plan better and get things to work in order, because I don't know, sometimes we forget we're mothers. Or I think sometimes we forget we're teachers when we're at school, we become mothers. And, you know, it's a role reversal at times.
Yes.
Sometimes it's a role reversal, total role reversal. When at home you're supposed to be a mother, you become a teacher. And when at school you're supposed to be a teacher, you become a mother. Yeah. So, this is so important. We need to ensure that we get things planned, we get things organized. Nothing comes easy. No. And nothing comes prepared. Nothing comes easy, and nothing comes prepared.
I think one of the things that I would say, having been to a lot of schools, is I embrace, you know, that some schools will allow the trajectory. So if the children are having a pivotal learning moment, they won't go right back to plan. They will say, right, we're going to follow that trajectory. The children are enjoying, like Christina's volcanoes and things like that. We're going to follow that. We're not going to cut off now. We're going to go. And that takes strength of character as well. But yeah, I've seen some really, really good teaching going on. But fundamentally, I think that young children tend to look at a parental role, a male teacher or a female teacher, tend to see it as an extension of mum and dad. And that also comes with trust. They begin to trust us. And when they have that trust and they're feeling happy, they will learn. That's the first thing we have to cultivate.
True. And that comes with a lot of experience that you hold. And thank you for sharing from your personal experiences, your anecdotes, your journey. You know, it is amazing listening to you. I think we could go on and on talking to you, but I won't keep you for long, because I heard that you were tired. Actually, you were traveling, and thank you so much. Despite all that, you know, you are here with a smile, and you're looking.
No, I wasn't. I was
fresh and
virtually
good.
traveling. I was working with a school in the Congo, Africa earlier
Oh,
on.
all right.
Yeah, so it's a virtual travel, but we were online for a long time. So yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And we wish you to have more of that grace, more of that energy, more of the drive. You know, that you could do much more. This also brings me to ask you. You know, you've mentioned that you work with I think 60 countries, and they're the rural communities, and your endeavor is to ensure that you know, the right kind of education reaches them, reaches those children who are depravity, and they don't get what we usually want them to get. My question to you is, what pushed you to go that extra mile? You know, quite often we become complacent, and we feel that sometimes we feel what we're doing is enough, or sometimes we feel what we're doing is more than enough. So what caused you, what pushed you to go that extra mile, to think of something like that?
I think it has to be something that is a personal thing, because you could easily stop and say, I've done enough. And it's once you've made that contact, you feel compelled, you feel the compassion to respond to teachers who are once in a position that I was, that you look for mentoring, you look for help. Sometimes I may not have the right answer and I'll have to find it from somebody else. But equally, it's a case, I wouldn't say you have to be a parent, but as a parent, you recognize that childhood is the shortest period of time, and the one where children have to do the most learning. It's a physical challenge and also a cognitive challenge, and that's about getting it right. So if my intervention anywhere, be it from recommending the right resources to use, giving teachers a methodology, being a mentor, or just listen to them being able to talk about their planning going wrong, I know that that impact will trickle down to the child. And ultimately, it's what will happen with that child. Will it change the child's trajectory with the information we have? So it's not a quest to change every child's life of the planet where I've been, no. But what it is one conversation can open the gateway to somebody looking at how they could do something better. 6 months of working with a school could leave them in a better place than they were originally. Working with teachers on a weekly basis about their planning can mean that the children leave the class happier and more fulfilled than they did before. So I'm not a magic wand. All I can do is make suggestions, and some of these may not work. But the drive ultimately is, I remember, you know, my son has dyslexia. I remember my son being totally frustrated with not being able to read and write. I don't want any child to have that. I do what I can. And I have the time to try and do it. A lot of the work I do is not paid for. So I make sure I have enough to pay the bills. And now, to be honest, it's all about what I can do before I run out of time.
Absolutely. You know, it's like happy students make a happy school, make happy parents, happy teachers.
Yeah.
So yes, you know, it's important that we ensure that none of our students are frustrated. If it is your own child, then you would know there could be so many students out there, so many
Yeah.
learners out there who could feel the same.
I think
So
it's important also to add, Michelle, that sometimes we're always looking at the academic path. Some children are not academically gifted in that it is transposed to paper and exams. However, they can be hugely gifted musically, with art, even with drama, with anything, and we can't ignore that as well. You know, it's not all about academic. It's important. Those bits of paper with your grades on are important, but there's also life around that, and that's another thing to remember.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think there's quite a lot done, but then there's much more that needs to be done for the entire education system, I would say, to change. Yes, quite many countries are looking into it and trying to change things for the children today. But yet there is a lot more that could be done. And I think most of it lies with us teachers. How some of the children, they don't know what they're good at. They feel if they're not good with academics, they could be no good elsewhere. And that's something we have as an onus on us to help them identify that they're good creative thinkers.
Yeah.
What they could think of, nobody else could think in a classroom setup.
Yeah.
Maybe they could, score a goal, and nobody else could do that.
Yeah.
Or they could paint a picture so beautifully that nobody else could even think of.
Yeah. And the important thing here, while you're talking about strengths, we are talking about strengths here that we have. It's really important that parents recognize this too. And of course, as a parent, we are hugely aware of the competition when children grow up, that they must have all the academic things in place to secure a good future. That alone, that pressure alone can set a child up for failure. So it's a balance of knowing when and where we do this and how we do it. And I think it comes with, I'm getting quite excited about your new curriculum that you're going to have in India, the NEP. And that is going to be a challenge and an exciting one for your teachers coming up. The new approach with the multisensory, a more kinesthetic approach to learning. So that's going to be interesting for India, an exciting one.
So that's amazing. It's wonderful listening to all that you have to say, and what's coming up is something that we're all looking forward to. And I would also like you've mentioned about your comeback. You had your setbacks, and how you made a comeback. You didn't. I would say give in to those moments when you felt everything was falling apart. Uh,
I couldn't really, because I had two children, and my children were living in the UK. You know, they're only in their 20s, so they're young to lose a father. But I had to be strong every day for my husband, who was in hospital virtually 6 months, and for my kids. So you realize there's something within yourself that you never thought of before. And some people will recognize this, that it takes an event in your life to change how you suddenly realize what you're capable of. I never realized how strong I was mentally until this happened. And I never realized how things can change so quickly. So those elements are things that I can say to teachers as well, that we must not be afraid of anybody really to make a change in your life. You know, you don't have to wait for an event like happened to me for it to make a change. And again, it goes full circle to what I said at the beginning about time. Use your time, find your strength, and really follow that. If you're a teacher and you think, well, I'm great with music, I'm great with language, then make that your strength. If you're a teacher that you get children motivated in a different way, in a different methodology, cooperative learning, you've got them to follow that. You become the master of that strength that you have. And mine was being able to go out and talk to people and put things in a way that could help them with either developing a school, developing a project, or even working one-to-one with kids, which I still do. I believe it's so important to work with children, to know where you're going with children, because the dynamics of teaching changes all the time. So that's another thing to look at.
Absolutely. dynamics of teaching keep changing, and so you have to be abreast with time. And like you said, you started off talking about time, and you're an opportunist, I must say. You made every opportunity to ensure that that time doesn't slip out of your hands. Although there were situations where you felt you could, but that didn't get you down. And that's amazing. That's something that you spoke about, that you need to become a master of your strength, and only you alone know where your strength lies, and you need to utilize that. You need to work that. I always talk to my students, and I always try to even talk to some of my colleagues, or whenever I get the opportunity, to tell them this pandemic has brought everything to a standstill. No one ever thought a time like that would come, where everything would come to a halt. It was us who took to learning to teach our children then. And we did that. And that was the time to actually show our students, our learners, our children, whether at home, because most of us are parents, and whether our students whom we teach, to show them that you should not give up. There could be nothing that can stop you from doing what you want to do, unless you have that drive in you, or you have that force in you. When you have that in you, nothing can stop you. Students look up to us as a role model. They look up to us as somebody who inspires them. And at a time as a pandemic, looking at us, so many of the students think about us, and they tell us, it was amazing to see you taking a class today, and I'm sure it might have been difficult. These are the grown-ups who would think like that. And they tell us that it is amazing, man, to see you do so much. And there's huge respect that's built up now, which means...
Yeah, I tell you, Michelle, the respect I have for the teachers who are suddenly thrust into an area that many of them didn't have any training for. It was one day you're at school, and then the next day you're online. And teachers were expected to learn a whole new skill set overnight about how to take what worked in the classroom and put it on an online platform and get the same results. And these are things that you're not trained for. And so that was a huge challenge. And I actually think that going back to the academic year this year, teachers are better equipped if it happened again. But I would say it's not a natural progression for many teachers. We all have our learning styles, audio, visual, or theatrical, as you mentioned. Our performance is in the classroom, and equally face to face, you get a different kind of interaction with a child rather than online. So the respect I have for teachers being thrown into that situation without any planning notice, without any way. The first month must have been horrendous. And yet they were still a parent, a head of a department, a dad, a mom. It was extremely hard. And I can see that, we are better equipped now. And I think we are all going to be better equipped, because we don't know if this is going to happen again. But we've learned a new skill set. We've learned about new methods. So in one way, it's been positive. In another, it was detrimental to the children who were having to spend so many hours online. And what we do know is the neurological damage this can have, not only with addiction, but also the learning process. So that's where I am now, is looking at how digital technology affects education with children, because I don't think we're going to go back from this. We may put it in two parallel ways of teaching, but we're not going to go too far back from being online, because we need the children to have the skill sets as well. But equally, children need to have all the basic skills in place. So it's going to be challenging. It's going to be challenging.
Absolutely challenging. And that's why I wanted to ask you, because you're the best person whom I could ask all my questions. And I'm sure there are many who are waiting for me to stop so that they could start.
Oh, yes, yes. Any questions, please, yes.
My last one to you, Yvonne, for the evening, and then I can open it up to all my audiences and my participants who have joined us this evening. And that is, you're unstoppable, I would say. You're an epitome of women empowerment, if I could say. You're an epitome of grace. So gracefully, you spoke about your challenges, your situations. What is it that you would want to share as a piece of advice, some nugget, some tip that you want to give, especially to all women, not particularly teachers per se, to all women?
Yeah, what I would say is that with age, I realize that as much as we try to find equality, it's a difficult thing to have. And it's a difficult thing because of cultural differences, the mindsets and everything. And what I've noticed in schools is that women get compartmentalized. And I'm talking very generally now. You know, there's the male role and the female role. And it's often pretty tough. And I'm not trying to offend anybody or anything, but I'm talking about generally how this is seen. And it's also the culture we build up with kids, how they tend to have more respect for male teachers than they have for female teachers. And often this is endorsed by the male teachers in the role. I really don't want to, I'm giving you feedback from schools I've been to, where in conversations we have this. And what I say is that we do have to have a change, and also the same with salaries, going right down to the basic things that still inequality happens with. Male teachers getting more than female teachers in some countries. So it is challenging, but what I would say is the more people that can get out there, more females that can get out there and show, just like myself, the power you have. You know, I have been into conferences which have been all male, which have been quite intimidating, as you can manage. And to be able to get across that barrier that actually, because you're male and I'm female, doesn't matter. What does matter is the learning journey we're going to have at this conference. So it's being able to have that strength to do it. But it takes time, it takes courage, also takes age. You know, it doesn't happen easily. It's something that yourself, going right back to what we're saying about having that inner strength, and also the belief in yourself that you can do something. And, you know, I would say that there have been times I've doubted what I could do, but then without doing it, I didn't know how to make it better, if you see what I mean. So there may have been things that I haven't done to 100%, but I've made sure that further on down the line, I'll get to 100%. So if I could be a role model as a woman for doing that, showing what can be done, that's an amazing achievement.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, there is a lot in us that we need to do, that we can do. And unless we go out there and do it all, we will never know that we could ever possess that in us. Thank you so much. I'm sure all of us are waiting to ask you questions, to talk to you like I have been talking to you for quite some time now. So I keep it open now to my audiences, my viewers, my participants, for your questions. So you could unmute if you want, or you could write that in the chat box so that we could go ahead with the answers.
Okay, waiting.
There's one in the chat box. I would begin with that for the others to get time to ask their questions. And that is, what advice would you give to young teachers on nurturing children, especially small children?
Okay. Well, the one thing that strikes to mind is conserve your energy. I remember being in that position where it's a long day and you're burning yourself out. Equally, what I would say is always remember that children don't get to the milestones at the same time. And as we've become a society where everything is done with assessments and where children should be, what I can tell you is they all eventually get to a point we need to get them to at some time, maybe. And this is why 6 years old is such a pivotal age, when cognitive development and milestones come together. But working with young children, what we do know is what they are ready for. And the brain works in stages. They're ready for language, they're ready for listening, but they're not ready for reading and writing. That takes a bit of time. And I've been to many places where they've tried to force it at 20 months and 24 months, and they're not ready. So it's, again, you're working in your unique learning environment with your unique bunch of children. So you have your planning, but you need to free up how they're working and how quickly they're working. So with very young children, it's understanding fundamentally the development milestones, how your plan fits in with that, and also allowing for that child born in January is nowhere near that child. The child born in December is not near the child that was born in January. My daughter was born in December, and she was always, everyone was way ahead at one point than she was because of that virtual 12 months. So that's something. No child learns at the same pace. They have a general path, but they're all doing it at their own pace, and then they even out. What I will say is by the time they get to 16, they all generally get there.
That is absolutely true.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Just a day ago, I had one of my students send me a request on LinkedIn. And I accepted the request, and surprisingly, that was my student who reminded me that, ma'am, you were a teacher in 2010, and we still remember you. That moment I felt good, but then I also felt, how old am I?
Yeah, yeah, that's really typical. Yeah.
So that really makes you feel so good, and you feel proud of yourself that you're doing something where someone remembers you, even though you're not there as part of their lives that moment.
Yeah.
I may not be in the student's life anymore, but he remembers me and remembers what kind of a teacher I was.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. That's the beauty of being a teacher.
Well,
All right.
I'll tell you something that was a little bit of a joke. My husband used to say I should work in missing persons, because everywhere we went in this part of the area, I'd bump into either a parent or a child I knew. So it gets to the point where it's quite a nice thing that, they all remember you. But yes, he used to say, you should work for missing persons, everybody.
That's a bit of advice.
Yeah.
So I would again ask my audiences, if you have any questions, you could either unmute or you could write it in the chat box, or just come up on screen and ask your questions. Christine, would you want to ask something? Would you want to say something?
Christine's brilliant.
She, by the way, Yvonne, she's the one who made me a teacher.
Oh, wow. Well, there you go. There you go. She's brilliant. She's full of life and always so much energy. Wow.
It's because of her. It's because of her that I'm a teacher. I wouldn't have been a teacher otherwise. And she was the one who told me, Michelle, you'll make a good teacher. Try doing it. Christine.
I love this. I have no questions for the best way. All my questions are all answered. But indeed, it's incredible to have you online and speak to the young teachers. But I'd like you to give some tips to the early learners and teachers, especially for continuous professional development. If you could stress this for the early young teachers to go about with this, how important it is to continuously learn and, upgrade, even despite the fact they're not. Some of them don't have online classes, nothing, but how important it is to upgrade and learn something new. So if you could just tell them some courses or something like that, that would really help them.
Yeah, well, what I did mention before, and thank you, Christine, is that what we're aware of is that children today come into nursery possibly equipped with a lot more knowledge than they did even 5 years ago, especially digital knowledge. So it's also the case of it's so easy to fall into just giving children digital resources, but we need to get them reading and writing. As you know, I'm very passionate about getting literacy and language out there, also synthetic phonics. But what I would say is, if any teacher is out there, look at how you can get children in early years doing their oral storytelling, because everything that we say will eventually go down into print. And the more that we can get children to externalize, the more that they'll get language in place, grammar structures in place, even with their mother tongue, and also learning another language. But more than that, what is happening, 60% in the world is that children are receptive. They're just listening and listening and listening. There is no conversation going on between a parent and a child, or a carer and a child. So my generation, where I would talk to my mother would be doing things and talking to me at the same time, we were building up that communication skills. Now, what I did see in a lot of classes is it's all the teacher telling what the child to do, and the child is having very little opportunity to orally respond. And it's all about, I'm getting through the lesson plan, I'm getting through the lesson plan. So eventually a small child will shut down and not even bother to communicate. So it's if you can understand the changes, and as I said, this is a learning curve for me right now, is understanding how the small brain is changing, how it's using its ability to use responses. Do you remember that time where a child would go, why, when they were 2 years old? We're not even getting to that now at 4. Children are becoming silent in their world. So any young teacher, if you could possibly, or old teacher, any teacher, if you're working with young children, try and look at how you can have an understanding in the way children are learning now, how simple oral language skills can be developed into storytelling, drama, and role play. And often these are ignored because we don't have enough time in the curriculum. It's the chicken and egg situation. We need more freed up time for children to explore language, use language. Mother tongue can always go to second language. We get them using language, but more importantly, we need the time to do that. Not trying to get children through the milestones too quickly. They will get to reading and writing, but you've got to know that the brain is not ready for it all until they're about 6. We can build up to it. And of course, there's some children who will do it perfectly and some who will take longer. But I think everyone now has to look at how children are learning, how the brain is changing to accommodate how children are learning only audio and visually. There's very little hands-on learning happening, and that's something we need to get children doing. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Thank you so much, Christine, for asking this question. It's imperative that, professional development is something that we all need to invest in, be it any profession for that matter. You can't grow unless you invest in your professionalism. So that is something that was good that you brought out. I have one more question in the chat box here that's asked is, how do you become a role model for your students?
Okay, simple one is, admit when you don't know something, because they'll love the fact that you're just like them sometimes. And, when that happens, you can say, I want you to go and find it out for me. I've had challenges in class where they were like, well, do you know? And you're like, well, actually, I don't. But you know what? Because you've asked me that, I'm going to ask you to go and find that out. And then you can take my role. Never be too, it's a humbling experience to be able to say, I'm going to let you take my role and be able to tell everybody what you found out. A good role model is being able to kind of like, it's an up and down thing where you can be the example they need to follow, Also, you can give a little bit of slack, as we say, where you can stand back and allow them to be the child they want to be, but also know how to pull them into the criteria of what is expected with society. You know, you can't be too rude, you can't be too loud, but, you know, I'm going to give you some, leverage with this within our classroom. But it's also like being, again, a parent with a student. Now, this is a bit unfair if you are a single person and you haven't had children yet. But what I'd say is just think about how you interact with your friends, the social norms that you have, what is acceptable and not acceptable. But I'd say more than anything is, if you're going to say you're going to do something, do it. If a child is in trouble and you've given them some form of punishment, be it, I hate the word punishment, something they have to do, either read a story, do a conference, follow it through, because you get respected at the end. You keep to your word, you give them some leverage, you admit when you're wrong, you give them some space and let them understand what it's like to be a teacher. Give them your role. I've done this with little ones where I've said, you can come up and be the teacher, and they love it. And I've equally done it with 18-year-olds where you come up and tell me what you know. So being a role model is a multifaceted thing. There's no answer that is pure and simple. And equally, you could transmit a role model, be a role model for 90% of the class, and there's 10% who would never see you as their role model. Also, role model is how you interact with your other teachers, and I suppose how you interact with parents as well. It doesn't have to be one-dimensional. So there's a lot of things in that, and that's something I'm still learning, I have to say.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, because yes, it is a humbling experience.
Yes.
When a teacher says, I don't know, what happens is students again get to learn. Learning never stops.
Yeah.
If the teacher says she doesn't know, they learn that she will get back with the right answer, or we need to get back to help her with the right answer. And they take much pride in saying, we taught this to our teacher.
Yeah. And of course, sometimes we do this even though we do know, because if that particular student is a weaker one in the class, we're giving them the opportunity to just show another facet of their personality that's never been allowed to be shown before. That child that sits quietly in the classroom and managed to put their hand up and say, oh, and you say, do you know what? I don't really know. Do you want to come up and share that with me? Come on. And suddenly, his friends see him in a new way. He's got a new bit of courage in him. It's like, wow, yeah, or her. And and I do know this because I'll tell you a little bit about, a little story about my daughter. My daughter was the girl that they put at the back of the class because she chatted all the way through. And I remember once they were talking about something to do with lengua, Spanish, and my daughter was able to interact with the head teacher who was taking the classes about a film, a sequence of a film, and he tapped into something that she was really, really knowledgeable about and enjoyed. And everyone was like, wow, she's not the girl who just talks in the class. She actually can say something, she actually has something to say. So, that is the pivotal moment where children saw her differently and she felt differently about herself. And I remember the head teacher came and told me, he said it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing, this conversation. We had dialogue just between the two of us. So I was like, oh, great. Not the naughty girl anymore.
True that. And when you said about your daughter, reminded me of my school days. I was always put at the back because of talking.
Yeah.
And talking and dreaming and doing everything else but studying.
Well, I have to say the skill that my daughter has turned out to be a fine orator. And that was one of the things. So keep talking, Michelle. One of those things with talkative children, they end up being really good and passionate about speaking as they grow older.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And that has been my endeavor, to see how many are the ones like me who do nothing in class, so that they're going to be doing something exceptional when they grow up. The ones who study, the ones who get good grades and everything is right with them. So often we have noticed things start falling apart for them once they leave school.
Yeah.
And the ones who did nothing absolutely in the classroom are exceptional once they leave the school.
Yeah.
So that again actually, causes us to think, what else can we do differently in a classroom?
And I think you've just said it there. We have to think about how we're educating children, because many people are familiar with Montessori and even Reggio Emilia, where children are learning at their own pace in a different environment. But then once we get to secondary, it all comes to formal learning. There's very few schools that take on alternative learning styles because of this attitude that we have to have an exam. So it's like, well, we really need to look at where we're going with education. Why are we teaching in the same methodology we taught 50 years ago? And children now are like little entrepreneurs. They come in and they can do so much more. It's not just about a PowerPoint anymore. It's about, it's presenting something that's dynamic, that is evolving every year. So it's an important time, yeah.
Absolutely. That reminds me of my son, who always tells me, let's go to a country where they don't teach the way we learn here, so that things change. Because once we go out of school, I don't know what I'm going to do with all this. And sometimes I have no answers for him.
Well, the truth of the matter is that most young adults at the age of 21 leave with a degree that they may never use.
True.
We're children when we make a decision about a degree we're going to do. We're children, at 16, 17, 18. And how do you know what you want to do when you get... So the majority of people I have met have all changed careers at some point. And even teachers, as I said, found their strength and did something in a slightly different area. But yeah, it's good. It's also challenging. It's good to evolve.
I totally agree with that. There's a question on Facebook that is asked, and that is, how do we prepare toddlers to cope up with online education in today's current situation?
It's very challenging, and I've worked a lot with teachers about how to facilitate young learners, and it's about looking at methodology. And with a lot of the teachers, we've been looking at a blended learning approach where the children are doing activities offline and then they're starting their online classes with readiness for their online classes. So we're not losing that precious time. And also, equally, they're engaged. Now, when you're a small child, when you have no idea what's going to be happening, you're instantly thinking about something else. But if you've had that blended learning approach where before class, you have an idea, you've had something to interact with, be it an online story, an audio story, you've had a resource that you can use online, the child is engaged and ready to start. However, we can't spend hours doing this, but what we can do, if you plan it correctly, you can get optimum learning for a lesser amount of time and have good results. But this goes right back to teachers having a complete different skill set, because we're using our in-class materials online, and a lot of these aren't designed for online. So it's a lot of adaptation has had to go on, and equally assessment. So there was some argument that children just got through the last few months drifting, and what did they actually learn? Well, at least it got them on some trajectory. They may have not been getting to where we wanted them to get to in a classroom, but there was some learning going on. And the most difficult aspect for early years teachers was the criticism from parents who were like, well, my child's learning nothing. It's very difficult for a child to learn online at that age. Then they can perhaps navigate a game, they can perhaps look at something on an app, but getting to teach online, having that face-to-face, eye-to-eye contact is completely different. So it was all about the methodology we used, completely different.
Absolutely. And here is where there's a transition from what you did earlier and what you have to do now. There has to be a change. Everything has to be reworked upon, revamped.
Yes.
Especially with young learners.
Totally, yeah. And the most pivotal thing about this was, we were working with children who are at home, and parents had no access to photocopiers, perhaps very limited resources. Was reorganizing what you wanted the child to do in an engaging way so that they were using their fine motor skills and to some degree gross motor skills with your online class. So it was hugely challenging, but a lot of it, we got there. We got there. Working with teachers, we got there.
We've come to the end of our questions. There's one I've received privately, and that is, do we need to understand children when it comes to physically understanding them, socially understanding them, even for that matter, spiritually, mentally, or financially?
Yeah, I think we have to encapsulate all of it. What I do notice is, for example, today's 9-year-olds are like, a few years ago, 12-year-olds. They're wrapped up in social media. They're so aware of things like YouTube and Twitter and Instagram. We're almost losing childhood way too quickly. And it's a shame, as I mentioned, it's the part that goes the quickest. But economically, yeah. And what I would say is that everywhere has its own unique learning environment, and the strategies you apply to that has to fit. It's not one fits every learning environment. It's completely unique. All to do with also, you can't go into a school or start a learning project being critical of teachers and what they have, because they've done the best that they can do in the place they live in, the area they live in, and the economic resources they have. So it's always like, how can we build on that? And it's the same with children. So you have to have this almost umbrella vision of where you want people to start and where you want them to end. But also with children, there's not one thing fits all. And this is the constant challenge. If you are working with schools, you see what happens. If I take you out of your teaching environment and put you in a country halfway around the world, you'll suddenly realize, I'm not doing so bad. I'm actually doing quite well. And actually my kids are doing quite well. And it's because nobody tells you, and nobody tells the kids, that you think you're plodding away. So, yeah, the challenges are there. And I don't think we'll ever find an easy answer to that one, Michelle. I don't think so. No,
totally agree with you. True. Everywhere. I mean, it's the same everywhere. Those teachers who would come here would think the same of what you said just now. When you pick people out and put them at a place elsewhere, and you try to analyze, you feel you're better in many ways.
Yeah, or fortunate is a good word. You're fortunate, yeah. But equally, what I would say is that most people who go into teaching don't do it for the money. Because they don't do it for the money. They do it for the passion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we do it for the passion. And a lot of the time, it's something that never leaves you. It never leaves you. Even if you go into another working environment, you're always proud to say, I was a teacher, or I am a teacher. True. And it's a complete vocation, and one that has huge challenges every single day. It's a challenging job, and people could be saying, well, being a doctor is challenging. Yeah, it is. I really acknowledge that. But yeah, it's a challenging job.
I totally agree with you. It reminds me that when you said the challenges every day, the Bible says each day has troubles of its own. And I think that was written for teachers also, yes. Specifically, because each day has troubles of its own.
Well, like a teacher has to be a diplomat. Sometimes you know everything that's going on and you can't really say anything. You know the parents are having troubles and it's affecting their child. You know a child that's got specific problems, but you can't share that with any. So you are like a diplomat in some ways. You're trying to keep it all together. So yeah.
So to be abreast with those problems, learning is important, because when you learn, you're able to actually, handle a situation better.
Yes.
So that brings us to our part of the end, and that is the rapid fire round before we could wind up for this evening. And I have a few questions for you, Yvonne. and
Okay.
I know you'll do very well. The first one is, what would your students be surprised to know about you, or your learners? What would they be surprised to know about you?
I can tap dance.
Wow, amazing. That's
And
lovely.
I love singing. I love singing and I love dancing. So much to the embarrassment of my kids. Yes.
That's amazing. That's lovely. That's something I actually want to learn, tap dance. I wish we were living in the same city. I could learn
Yeah,
from you.
no, I like tap dancing.
My next one to you is, what's a typical Saturday night like for you?
Well, being in Spain, we eat late, so dinner would be late. I do miss walking my dog. I had a little dog for years and he's gone. I do miss that. So a typical Saturday night would be, without COVID, it would be clearly going out to eat, being with friends, watching a movie. I do like to talk and socialize. So even now it's done virtually online. We can have online meetings with friends on a Saturday night. And and I do keep in contact with friends of mine who've got children. I do like that interaction with children. So a Saturday night would be a good opportunity to meet families with kids.
That's lovely. Tell me something. My next one to you is, what can you cook to perfection?
Oh, I love cooking. So I'd say to perfection, it would be a roast dinner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. Bit boring living in Spain, I have to say, but yeah, I wouldn't say I'm that there with the Spanish food. It's very, very good, but English roast dinner, yeah, I could do that to perfection.
lovely, lovely. Um, if you had to, if you won a lottery and you decided to give up teaching, what would you do instead?
I'd have a refuge for animals.
Awesome. That's lovely. Because that was my next one up for you. And that is, what are some pets you'd have had or would like to own?
All right, so I've had about 13 dogs and
Wow.
I've had rabbits and things like that, the things you do with all of that. But I actually think it would be great to have a place where it was a place for animals, but also an educational centre for children that they learn, because there's many children that find it very pacifying to be around animals, small petting animals, and learn a lot, not only just about animals, but about themselves. So yeah, I love all animals. I'd really, really like a cow, of all things. I would love to have a big black and white cow called Daisy, and I'd sing to it. So that would be great company.
That's amazing, and that's really lovely listening to you. And I'm sure most of your near and dear ones would know you better and would actually be smiling and wondering that that is something that Yvonne would really love to do. And thank you so much for being with us. Before we
Thank you. It's been wonderful to be able to chat. Really, really wonderful.
It is a privilege to have you, Yvonne, and I'm so glad we connected. Thank you to this virtual world where we could actually get to know each other and come on my show. Before we,
the privilege is mine. I'm just doing my job. Really, it's a job, and it's a job I love and enjoy. So the privilege is mine that I've been able to spend my time with you. So thank you very much.
I have a little token of love and appreciation to share with you. I'll be sharing my screen right now, and that is all for you, Yvonne, with all my love. Thank you so much for accepting my request, and thank you so much for coming as a guest on my
Thank you very much.
This one is for you. I'm looking forward to quite many interactions, and I'm looking forward to quite many sessions where I could have with you, maybe different kinds, and not just maybe just a chat, but something different that we could do together to bring about a difference everywhere. And I would love to,
That's a good question to ask the people who watch this is, what would you like to talk about? Because we're then following their trajectory, and maybe that conversation could change something in their life. So that's the way to look at it.
Absolutely.
Follow their trajectory. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening there. And
before we end, I would want to ask all our participants if you want to come quickly with your videos on for a picture with Yvonne,
lovely.
me. So quickly, if you could come with your videos on, or else it's just going to be me and Yvonne. That's thank you so much for turning your video on. And if anybody else, Christine, if you're hearing us, you could put your video on and quickly, so we could grab a picture together, all of us.
My daughter's down there. Look at that, Alex. Alex, are you online?
How sweet.
Yeah. How nice.
How sweet. Come on, quickly with your videos on, so we could grab a click quickly. I'm waiting. Come quickly, everyone.
Come on, Alex. Can you hear? She's probably, I don't know if she can hear me. She's got her mic.
Hello.
Hey, there you go. If you want to quickly just go online for a photo, darling. Put your camera on.
Okay, 1 second.
Okay.
Let me just make my hair less crazy.
That's all right. You just have to be you.
She has a lot of hair. So here we go. Christina, you're beautiful. Look at the shelf. It's beautiful. And we just need Alex. Well, it's been a really, really lovely opportunity. And
You know what I mean? It's a bit...
You're beautiful, Alex.
She's got long hair.
Really beautiful. And here we go. We're ready. And I'll take a click. And oh, that's my brother, Aaron. Thank you so much, Aaron, for coming on camera with us. I have my colleague, Pavita, with us. I have Christine, because of whom I've become a teacher. Alex, you're beautiful. I must say, you're beautiful. Your hair is lovely. You have beautiful mum, and I think beautiful mums make beautiful children. I would take to say that. And here we go, and that's all of us in one frame. Amazing.
Aaron is our techie guy. Aaron is our main man, is he?
He's the one who helps in nothing.
No, not at all.
Without Aaron, it's not.
I'm nowhere close to being a techie guy. No way.
He's a techie guy. He's our man. Our man.
I look like a techie, but no, I'm not a techie guy at all.
Yeah.
But what he does is he whenever he gets time, he always tunes in, and that's all that really matters to me. And I love him. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I once again would like to thank you, Yvonne. We had a beautiful evening, and
yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christine. Christine has been my unofficial market person. My digital marketing is what she does. She's the one who gets people for me. And this is to all our audiences and all my viewers listening to us on Ray of Hope, where hope is not lost, is a place where you could get a chance to share your story. Of something that could inspire someone, something that could spread hope around, could be anything. Just get in touch with me, and I'll make sure that you're live with me for the next session. And thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for a wonderful evening with us. I don't know what part of the day it is in Spain. Is it the evening there?
It's early evening. So over here, it's nearly 5 o'clock. In London, it's 4 o'clock. So yeah. We've got a bit of time to go.
All right. So you can have a lovely weekend. God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Thank
That's
you.
my show all about.
YouTube that have joined in. Thank you very much. The people on YouTube.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. That's been really amazing.
Bye, everyone.